All right, so let's get right into it. We're going to talk about one of the most fascinating figures of the 20th century, a man named B.J. Habibie. And his story is, well, it's a huge paradox. Imagine reaching the absolute top of two totally different fields. I mean, we're talking world-class aerospace engineering and the presidency of a massive country in turmoil. But here's the wild part, the thing that defines his entire life. He never wanted the power. Not at all. He just wanted to build airplanes. And this right here, this quote really gets to the absolute core of who he was. From the very beginning, his dream was so specific, so pure. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It wasn't a stepping stone to get somewhere else. Building planes, that was it. That was the whole dream. So you gotta ask, right? How on earth does a guy like that, with zero political ambition, end up running the fourth largest country in the world? I mean, just look at this. This really lays out the whole insane journey. In 1960, you've got this penniless kid from Indonesia studying in Germany, barely scraping by, completely obsessed with airplanes. Fast forward 38 years, and he's the president. That transformation wasn't some grand plan, no way. It was just a product of chaos, a sense of duty, and a chain of events that you almost couldn't make up. Okay, so to really get the president, you have to start with the engineer. And our story doesn't begin in some fancy political office. Nope. It starts in Parepare, a small port city in Sulawesi, Indonesia. And it's from there that his brilliant mind would launch him all the way to the very center of German engineering. You know, it's hard to overstate just how intense this period of his life was. This wasn't just studying abroad. We're talking about a level of dedication that was just almost superhuman. He lived on practically nothing and studied with a focus that even his German colleagues found shocking. And he didn't just walk away with a degree. He earned a doctorate in an incredibly tough field and got hired right away by Messerschmitt, one of the biggest names in German aerospace. And this is probably his most direct impact on, well, on all of us. It's called the Habibie factor. If you've ever flown in a plane, you have this man to thank. So what is it? Put simply, it's a way to predict when tiny little cracks in an airplane structure, cracks you can't even see, are about to become catastrophic. His work basically helps answer the huge question, when is a plane too old to fly safely? It's literally why air travel is as safe as it is today. But you can't tell Habibie's story without talking about his anchor, his wife, Hasri Ainun Basari. She was a brilliant medical doctor in her own right, and she was the perfect emotional counterweight to him. You see, he was this force of nature, intense, fiery, a total whirlwind. She was his calm, his center of gravity. He always said she was the absolute heart of his life, the one who kept him grounded. So all this success in Germany, it's not the end of the story. It's actually just setting the stage for the next incredible chapter. Because in 1974, he gets a call from the President of Indonesia, Suharto. And the message is as simple as it is audacious. Come home. We need you to build our country and aerospace industry from absolutely nothing. And Habibie's plan for this was, well, it was completely bonkers. He called it the leapfrog strategy. The idea was, forget taking small, careful steps like every other developing country. Nope. He wanted to leapfrog Indonesia directly into the most advanced aerospace technology out there. It was wildly ambitious, incredibly expensive, and, to folks at the World Bank and the IMF, it looked completely insane. But to Habibie, this wasn't just a project. It was about national pride. And this timeline, it tells a story of the highest of highs and the absolute lowest of lows. The N-250 aircraft was his masterpiece, the crown jewel. A totally modern plane designed from the ground up by Indonesian engineers. Imagine the pride when it made its first flight in 1995. It was this incredible moment for the whole country. But then, just 3 years later, the Asian financial crisis devastates the region. And as part of the IMF bailout package, one of the conditions was cancel the N-250 program. Just like that. His life stream was dead. And here's the ultimate irony. The very same crisis that destroyed his dream of building airplanes is the thing that throws him into a job he never, ever wanted. With the economy in freefall, President Suharto makes a last-ditch move and appoints Habibie as his vice president. And that single decision would change everything. And then it happens. The breaking point. May 21st, 1998. After 32 years in power, President Suharto steps down. And just like that, B.J. Habibie, the engineer who just wanted to build planes, is now the president. president of a country whose economy has completely collapsed, who has no political allies, and with millions of people on the streets screaming for revolution. What happens next is just unbelievable. It's one of the shortest but most impactful presidencies you'll ever see. He was in power for just 517 days. And in that time, he basically took apart the entire authoritarian system he had just been handed. 517 days. That's it. Not even a year and a half. It's almost mind-boggling to think about what he was able to do in such a tiny, tiny window of time. And the changes he made were lightning fast and radical. First, he freed the press. Boom, censorship gone. Hundreds of new newspapers and magazines appeared overnight. Next, he opened the prison doors and released political dissidents. And the big one? He set up the first genuinely free elections the country had seen in more than 40 years. Think about that. He did in months what the old regime hadn't done in 3 decades. But then came the decision, the one that would define his entire legacy and pretty much end his political career. And it all centered on East Timor. This was a 24-year-old wound, a former Portuguese colony that Indonesia had invaded and occupied back in 1975. It was a brutal, painful conflict, and it was a stain on the nation's soul. So what did Habibie do? Something politically suicidal, but morally pretty straightforward. He said, let the people decide. He offered them a vote, a referendum, and the results came back and they were undeniable. A massive 78.5% of the people of East Timor voted for one thing: independence. But here's the cold, hard political truth. For the powerful elites back in Indonesia, this wasn't a brave moral act. It was treason. The backlash was swift and it was brutal. By giving East Timor its freedom, Habibie signed his own political death warrant. Plain and simple, that one decision cost him everything. So when you look back on it all, what's the final verdict? How do you even begin to measure the legacy of this engineer who, for just 517 days, literally held the future of an entire nation in his hands? It's complicated, for sure, but it's also a story of incredible courage, and his impact is undeniable. I mean, just look at the sheer range of his influence. It's staggering. He laid the foundation for Indonesia's entire modern democracy. He inspired a whole generation of Indonesian scientists and engineers. His choice on East Timor was a massive moment for human rights, and yeah, his engineering work from decades ago is still helping keep us all safe when we fly. It's just a lot. But if you really want to understand the man, forget the politics for a second. Let me leave you with this one image. It's 1995. The N-250, his airplane, is making its very first flight. And down on the ground, Habibie is just openly weeping. And you have to understand, he wasn't crying because a piece of metal was in the air. He was crying because Indonesia was flying. It was everything he had ever dreamed of for his country, right there in the sky. Look, he wasn't a perfect man. He wasn't a perfect president. Nobody is. But he was a man who deeply loved his country. He gave it his brilliant mind. And he threw away his own career to give it a shot at a real democratic future. And what he left behind is a nation that, in its best moments, is still striving to live up to the incredible legacy he gave them.